What's good, people? Welcome to episode 56 of Stack Sats or Die Trying. This is the Bitcoin Only Show brought to you by the Hood as well as the Black Wealth Rebels. This is episode 56, the Lawrence Taylor episode. As an aside, Lawrence Taylor is the greatest football player ever, but I digress. Don't want to argue that. I'm not even a Giants fan, nor a Lawrence Taylor fan. I mean, the fact is, it is what it is. Anyway, this is episode 56 of Stack Sats or Die Trying. This is the Bitcoin Only Show. Come on once a week and talk about what's going on in the world of Bitcoin. Let's just get right into it, right? I have a PowerPoint presentation, right? We're going back into the classroom this episode on episode 56. You know what I'm saying? By the way, before we get started, gotta say, let me show you guys real fast. I don't know if you saw that. Under my name, the website, stacksatsorddietrying.com. Yes, I do officially own that domain name, stacksatsorddietrying.com. It will take you to where the Stack Sats episodes appear in the village. In order to get early access, you go to that website, make sure you join the village. There is a free tier because all members of the village, whether they're free or paid, get access to Stack Sats or Die Trying before it hits YouTube, Facebook, and all that. So just make sure you join the village, and the village is blackwealthrebels.com, but you can go to stacksatsorddietrying.com if you only care about the Bitcoin content. But I digress. Let's get right back into the actual presentation that we're going to talk about today. And today's presentation is called The Magic of Money Creation. So why do I want to talk about this? Because I often talk about inflation and money creation, and I've even went into how some of the work that I do is understanding what broken money is and how to combat broken money. Believe it or not, the work I do in real estate as well as the work I do in Bitcoin is really about the idea of combating what's known as broken money. Part of the reason that we have broken money the way we do is because of the magic of money creation. And many people don't understand how money creation affects not just our economy, but our overall way of life, right? So we're going to talk about how money is made, how money is moved, and also something that people don't realize is who benefits from the idea of money creation. So let's get into the actual presentation right now. What is fiat money, right? Fiat money is money created by the government. It has nothing backing it, and it has an unlimited supply. So there's no fixed limit on creation of fiat currency, right? Fiat currency just isn't the US dollar. It's any other dollar that is put forth by decree by the government. Now, what I want to say about this is fiat is kind of like a dirty word, right? Fiat is a dirty word to us Bitcoiners, but you really have to understand what fiat currency is. So up until 1971, our money was backed by gold. Our money is no longer backed by gold. So our money is really just has value because we all say that it has value. You know what I mean? So that's the idea of that. But the key controllers of fiat currency are the central banks, the government, and private banks. Nowhere in there did you hear me say the people. I said central banks, the government, and private banks. And the idea of fiat currency is it can be printed or created on demand, right? So there's no physical asset backing required for fiat currency to exist. So our money no longer has to be backed by gold or anything else for that matter. Some people will say that our money is backed by tanks and machine guns and bullets and things of that nature. And I can understand why people would say that. But to start this conversation about money printing, we want to talk about fiat currency and the fact that nothing has to back it and there is no fixed supply. It's unlimited supply. And to me, that is very problematic, right? And when you look at how money is created, you realize that we have a problem dealing in this system with this fiat money, which leads to bigger problems for our way of life overall. So here's an example of the Fed injecting 100 million, right? Let's just say the Fed decides that they want to increase the money supply by 100 million, right? They would take it to a commercial bank and say, hey, here on your balance sheet, create $100 million deposit that comes from the Fed. The bank creates that, right? The bank takes action. They create that on their balance sheets, push a button, $100 million is now here. So the bank then takes action. They want to lend out that money or invest the funds. So for those of us that have good credit, you know what I mean? And by the way, I say that as someone who tore their credit up ungodly. And I've told the story several times. I tore my credit up in college. It was very disgusting. I told the story about how Discover gave me like $12,000 in credit card balance. And I didn't even have a job, but I was trying to get the free T-shirt and the free bottle that they had on campus. You know what I mean? Anyway, but I digress. Point is, they put the money on the streets, right? They lend the money out, and also it's kind of wild because the banks get to do some things. If I did what the banks do, they would call it loan sharking. You know what I mean? I would be arrested, probably charged with RICO, but, you know, get back to the point. The point is they put the money on the street, they lend the money or they invest the funds. Then you have recipients. So if I'm going to get a small business loan or a student loan, or I'm going to, you know, borrow money for whatever that may be, I then spend that money. I pay bills. I invest the money. I put the money into the system. I put it into the system. So we do all the various things to get the money, you know, into the system. So the money's injected into the system. And now we have more money that is floating through our overall economy, whether that's money that is invested in the market, whether it's to pay bills, whether it's spent, you know what I'm saying, it could be spent in nightclubs or you know what I'm saying. Some of y'all don't know how to control, you know what I mean? Some of y'all just don't know how to control, you know, yourself. So you're going to spend it in ways that you shouldn't spend it.
What you going to do with them titties? Oh, excuse me. What you going to do with those breasts?
No shots. But it's going to be overall in our economy, right? And then what happens is that cycle continues because it re-enters the banking system at some point. And then when it re-enters the banking system, you know, money is lent out again. So it's just an overall process that's continuously going, and it helps our actual dollars become worthless because this money is injected into our economy. The thing about it is we hire people to kind of like take care of certain things for us in terms of people we put in place in government. And a lot of times they're just not fiscally responsible. And, you know, it's up to us to hold people accountable. So when you want to hold people accountable, you want to make sure that they're spending money in the way that makes sense for us as consumers and as Americans, right? But they're not fiscally responsible and they keep kicking the can. And when they continuously print money and they make inflation go crazy, we're the ones that pay for that, right? But you have to have an understanding of what's going on in order to combat it, right? And then there's a money multiplier effect, right? The bank creates new money with the initial loan, which then adds into new deposits because those funds are added to the borrower's account. They go spend, money circulates in the economy, and the money supply grows exponentially because it's expansion after that, expansion. So new money, there's new deposits, more spending, and then expansion. And expansion of the money causes all sorts of other issues downstream that a lot of times that, you know, and I shouldn't even say they don't think about it because it just is what it is, right? It's just part of how our system currently works. But the thing about it is when you had the knowledge, you know what I'm saying? When you do the knowledge.
Do the knowledge, nigga.
Of how things work, then you can combat it and put yourself in a position to be on the other side to take advantage of the system. So either we're going to tear the system down and start from scratch, which will require bloodshed, require bullets and all kinds of other things that people aren't willing to do. So if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to tear the whole bitch down, what you have to do is you have to figure out how do I prosper within this system, right? Which is by having the information. So there are pros and cons of money creation. I'm not going to say that it's an over, like, you know, just everything's con, because there are pros of it depending upon how you look at it, right? Because the pros are this: it does fuel economic growth, right? So we continuously make our economy and our businesses and things like that grow, right? It supports credit flow and it enables investments. But if you don't have the knowledge of knowing why you should invest or that you should invest, then you're not really on that side, on the left-hand side where the pros are, right? And if you listen to the audio of this, you know, I appreciate that. If you maybe want to take a look at the video because it is a PowerPoint slideshow, you know what I mean? But you still can understand what I'm saying. There are pros of the constant money printing, such as economic growth, credit flow, and enables investment. But I do believe that the pros do not outweigh the cons because excessive money printing has risks associated with it. It leads to overall wealth inequality because when you print money, those that already have the resources, they get it first, by the way, right? You get the money first because you have the credit, you have the connections, right? And then you're able to take advantage of asset prices. But once the full money hits, the asset prices go up. The value of the dollar goes down, so asset prices go up. So if I have access to early capital, I can buy the land, I can buy the businesses, I can buy the Bitcoin, right? Remember, this is stack, sats, or die trying. So we're talking about this through the lens of a Bitcoiner. But it's good to understand all of this to kind of process why many of us who are Bitcoiners are passionate about Bitcoin. It's not that we're saying that Bitcoin is the be all end all. I mean, some folks say that, but it's the understanding that Bitcoin is what you're using to have this fight against broken money. If I thought it was something better than Bitcoin, again, I've said this before in the past, I will be whatever that is, Maxi. But after doing the knowledge and understanding the power of Bitcoin, I just don't see anything that is better, right? But the other part is this will cause inflation. That is a huge con because the cost of goods and services costs more because the value of the dollar is going down, the assets go up, and it creates this cycle, this never-ending cycle that we've been on since 1971. So understanding how money is created, how it gets into the system, and how it can become problematic, you have to combat it. So there's also what's known as the Cantillon effect, right? The wealthy investors benefit the most because they are the first recipients. Financial institutions, right, have early access to the new money. The general public, which is why I said when you talk about fiat currency, you do not see the people. You do not see their name. They're the last to receive it. They face the higher prices of goods and or services, right? So the wealthy benefit from the constant money printing in a whole different way than the average citizen does. The average citizen falls on the con side when the wealthy falls on the pro side. So it's more of the same. It's more of the same. The rich getting richer, right? And it's why we have huge wealth inequalities in this world, I should say. Not the country, in the world, there are huge wealth inequalities because the first recipients of constant money printing are investors who are able to then take advantage of it because they also have access to information and data. So now, as the asset prices go up, they control more of it, which means they control more of the economy. They control more of the politics. It is what it is. Here's a quick case study. Let's talk about what happened during COVID-19, right? I don't care how you feel about COVID-19. This is not to get political in that standpoint, but it's just to give you a quick example. The pandemic hit. There was an economic shutdown, and it threatened a huge collapse on pretty much everything. I learned a lot during the pandemic. One thing I learned is this whole goddamn country is being held on by a thread. So quantitative easing took place. There was a massive money supply increase. And because of that, asset prices surged. Who do you think own the assets? Who owns the stocks? Who owns the real estate? Who owns the crypto? All of those things boomed during COVID-19. But what happened after that? What are we still to this day seeing the results are? What we're seeing is this. What we're seeing is inflation that followed the huge increase in those asset prices because that is how the process works. It goes from one to the other, right? It goes from the printing and ends up ending in inflation. And you have to figure out how to combat the inflation, right? So that is the problem. The problem is everything looks good when the money's being printed, People are spending the money, and then you're also putting it into assets in the economy. Everything looks good, but then you have to pay for that. The chickens come home to roost, as Malcolm would say.
The chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing.
Right? So a couple final thoughts, right? It's a double-edged sword. I told you there are some pros if you consider those pros to be valuable. I just want to point that out. I want to make sure that I give both sides of it, right? Money creation, it powers growth. It does power growth. But now when you really think about that, is it true growth? Because if I'm powering these companies just by printing constant money, what is the value of those companies? Is it inflated, right? Because those aren't necessarily hard assets. Hard assets are land, gold, Bitcoin. Those are hard assets. But the value of a company is technically inflated by inflation. So that's why it's a double-edged sword, because it does enable growth, but it also creates risk. And also you have to think about the distribution. So who gets it first determines the winners and losers. And as you saw me go through the process, you see where it goes first, who's able to take advantage of it, and what did that do to the distribution of wealth within the country, and not just the country, but the overall world, because it just makes the actual inequality just get further and further apart. So as long as money is constantly being printed, the wealth inequality just gets worse, right? So what you need is a balanced approach. You need policy that considers equity alongside growth, right? Equity is the key word there, right? So it's about equity. And the current system does not offer equity in terms of how the money is printed and who's able to benefit from the printing of said money. So you can't just worry about growth without concerning yourself with equity. Equity has to be an important part of the process of that money printing. So that's what's needed. Do we have it? Absolutely not. I don't even know if we're looking for it. People, especially now in the climate that we're in, people don't even care about equity. So the fact is, things will get worse as the printer still goes off. The last thing is always think about who benefits from the current system, and regardless of whatever system that is, and regardless of whatever system you think should be in place, right? Some things is not about necessarily what you think should happen. It's about what is actually happening. So who benefits from that system, right? Follow the money from creation to distribution. And if you look at it from the beginning of where it's created to how it's distributed and where it's distributed, you see who benefits from it and who doesn't benefit from it. So the question you have to ask yourself is, how can we create a more equitable outcome? That comes from policy. Policy is important. No matter how much you try to escape politics, you really can't. Doesn't matter what business you're in. Doesn't matter whether you're in the finance sector, the real estate sector, the crypto sector. Policy is important because policy is how you create equitable outcomes. But the fact of the matter is, who's even thinking about that as it pertains to money printing right now, right? So some will ask, well, forget all that. What can I do to kind of combat it? What alternatives exist? First thing on my list is what? Is Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is the people's money. When you saw me talk about fiat, the one name you didn't see in there was the people. Bitcoin is the people's money. Another alternative, just to put it out there, this is a Bitcoin show, but just, going through a thought exercise, is community banking, right? Creating community banks. One of the reasons that I'm so proud of the work that's being done by my investment club is we're becoming a community hub, and we're pooling our resources to kind of help each other at a micro level, right? At a micro level. So we're kind of like, not necessarily directly into the system. That's an alternative. Bitcoin is an alternative, becoming your own bank. Also, direct stimulus through policy. If you were able to somehow have the money hit to everyone in an equitable way, right? That would also change things. But how things currently stand is problematic. And I don't even think that people are thinking about the fact that it should be changed or that it can be changed. A lot of people at this point have just given up on the idea of changing the system, and they're just going about it. And the other thing is, goes back to Corey and I's book, Own Your Time and Space, right? When you control people's time, they don't have time to think about what the problems are or what the solutions can be. So you kind of control them in that manner. That's something else that's going on, is that people are basically caught up in the matrix. They're getting up, trying to make their family survive, going to work, doing the best they can. And they don't even have time to really think about how this system works and how this system is affecting their day-to-day life. That is what I want to talk about in terms of this episode with money printing. And why is that important? That is important as a Bitcoiner, because that is part of the core thesis of why it's important to do the knowledge with Bitcoin and study. And not just Bitcoin, but to study all asset classes. To me, Bitcoin is a solution. Bitcoin is powerful. I already know what it's going to be. But the idea is, when you go down the rabbit hole and continuously study, it will all lead to Bitcoin, but you can attack it in different ways. That's why I said Stack Sats or Die Trying is a Bitcoin show, but it's much more than that, because Stack Sats or Die Trying is about attacking broken money, attacking systems, and just putting ourselves mentally in a place where we know that it's something that has to happen. It's not about buying Lambos. It's not about, stunting on people. It's about figuring out how we navigate this system and how we literally survive, right? We talk about the word responsibility. Do you have the ability to respond when something goes wrong? That's a bar. Responsibility. Do you have the ability to respond when something goes wrong? One more time for you. Responsibility. Do you have the ability to respond when something goes wrong? Slow it down. I just did. If you're not combating broken money, you won't have that, right? If you're stacking assets, if you're stacking the S&P 500, if you're stacking sats, if you're stacking, land or different assets, then you will have the ability to respond. Fact is, Bitcoin is the king of all assets. So you should be stacking sats. Not investment advice. Do whatever you want to do. I'm not your fiduciary, but this is Stack Sats or Die Trying. So you know what I'm going to say. And I'm consistently stacking sats, because stacking sats to me is the most important thing I can do, not just for myself, but the generations that follow me and my family. This is bigger. This is bigger than Nino Brown.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is big business. This is the American way.
Anyway, with that being said, listen, make sure to join the village. Go to blackwealthrebels.com. Visit the new site, stacksats.com, which will take you to, the Stack Stats podcast within the village. And we do call it a village because we are truly building community. We talk about money. We talk about culture. Everything we do is about community. June 14th, we will be in the community live event, live Black Wealth Rebels event. Also, our summer camp is coming soon, so the actual website should be up soon with the actual dates when we lock those in. A lot going on in the community. We are putting in the work. Listen, Wednesdays is Wealthy Wednesdays. Fridays is Freedom Fridays. We are live on both nights having conversations. This week, we are going to talk about the merger between Discover and Capital One. That'll be this Wednesday. Friday, we're going to talk about, a little bit about sports business. We're going to talk about the Shedeur Sanders, incident, or if you want to call it an incident, however you feel about it. We're going to talk about that a little bit on Friday. And this weekend on Sundays, every Sunday, we do a free stock market class. But this is Stack Sats or Die Trying. If you're interested in starting to stack sats, maybe you've never started to stack sats, look in the description box, and you'll see the places that I use to stack my sats, right? As my big four, as I call it. If you watch Stack Sats or Die Trying, you know what they are. But because I talk to people in the village in our community every day, I know that some people still don't know where to go. They're still going to Coinbase. They're going to all these raggedy places instead of going to one of the big four, which you can find in the show notes or the description. You know what I mean? So we have various ways of stacking sats, whether that's the free games, whether that's setting up DCA. But the idea is we are building. We are building a community, and people within our community are building wealth for them and their families. And, one of the core parts of my overall strategy is to be a Bitcoiner and understand that, we could talk about money printing all day long. What the solution is, what my idea is about the solution is, right? So stack sats or die trying. With that being said, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Give me some feedback on this episode. But as always, stack sats or die trying. Peace.